You are listening
You are listening
You're listening to
to Not
Not Elsewhere.
Not Elsewhere.
Elsewhere
Classified.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Not Elsewhere Classified podcast. If you're watching this podcast for the first time, welcome. Today in the podcast, I have Janice Amon. Janice and I go way back 7 years ago when she was a consultant for a popular company, and she went to my facility to teach me a certain new software. And so we really go into her career from really from the beginnings in medical records as a CDI specialist, moving into a consultant, into another consultant role, and now I believe she's a compliance director, a coding compliance director. But in this conversation, which is again a two-part series, we talk about what it's like to be a consultant, because when I first got out of school, one of my biggest goals was to be a consultant. But you have to think about, what does it take to be a consultant? And so I think for the most part of the first part of this conversation, we really dig into that. So without further ado, here is part 1 of 2 of my conversation with Janice Amon. Enjoy. Welcome everybody to the Not Also Classified podcast. Today on the podcast, I have Janice Amon. Now, before I kind of welcome her to the podcast, we were just talking earlier, and I was just thinking, well, we met 7 years ago. Let's start off with that, right? 7 years ago, and the reason why I was looking at the LinkedIn. So, what's very important, I'm just going to say right now, if you're working as a coder, as a CDI, as a HIM professional, you will meet a lot of consultants. Like, your boss will bring in a consulting group, and then those people will come in. And so what's important, and I've done this throughout my career in CDI, is I've met a lot of consultants. And so I've always made it a priority. Whenever a consultant comes in, I must network with that person. And so when I first started CDI, I already knew this person, but it was the trainer who taught me DRGs. I connected with him, but I already knew him from a long time ago. Then the next one was Dr. Cecil Mhoko and Kelly Estes. I connected with them. I connected with LinkedIn. I connected them on Facebook, on Instagram too. And then you came, you came before them. And so we connected on LinkedIn as well. And I remember you were a trainer for a specific software. We'll talk about that, not specifically the company, but your role in itself. But regardless, I do want to welcome on the podcast, Janice Amon. Welcome, Janice. How are you today?
Good. Thanks, Brian, for letting me be your guest for your podcast. And I really admire that you are one of the pioneers in starting this type of thing in our career, because it's just happening. They do have a podcast on other things, but I don't think there's so many people that are doing this, with our career. So
yeah,
thank you for having me.
No, I appreciate it. I mean, who else is doing this? I mean, I think like just having conversations is all we need to have. I think that's it. I mean, people are very drawn to webinars and sessions. Yeah, that's great. But what about just
talking?
Yeah,
right.
Just
right.
Casual conversation. Casual conversation that you can listen to while you work, that you can listen to while you're, I don't know, cleaning the dishes, doing the laundry, whatever, mowing your yard.
I don't know about that. Doing laundry.
You don't want to hear talking about CDI about doing laundry. So yes, 7 years ago, when I was a CDI specialist, the department brought in a consulting group that was part of a specific popular software that I'm sure most everybody uses, right? And so They were like, oh, okay, this software will do this. It introduced, at least for me, to me natural language processing, computer assisted coding. That was the first experience I ever had with that very early on, 2014. That's like
2014.
Yeah, it's yeah, go ahead.
Oh, it's one of, I think they are pioneer when it
Mm,
comes to the natural language processing and the computer assisted coding, and everything after that, a lot of other companies have followed.
mm-hmm.
So, and let me talk about like where I came from, who am I,
Okay, you might as
I'm,
well jump on to the first
yeah,
question.
yeah,
Go ahead.
might
Go
have
ahead.
just jumped to that one.
Yeah.
So yeah, I actually, I went to college at Cal State Long Beach with my bachelor's in science and health science.
Mm,
And then after that, I was like, what am I going to do with my life? Right.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because I don't know if I want to go, to the community. Because I think they specialize on community health. So I don't really know what to do after. So I went to medical school in the
Mm.
Philippines after that.
Oh, okay. So
So
you went backwards. You went from the US to the Philippines.
well, I graduated high school in the Philippines. So I was
Oh, okay.
from the Philippines, and then I came here, I immigrated here
Mm,
and then went to college over here
mm,
in the United States. And then I really want to be a doctor. So I said, okay, let me finish my medical school degree in the Philippines. And I actually wanted, to be a plastic surgeon or an aesthetic
mm,
medicine type of doctor because
mm.
I know how to draw and all that stuff. So very artistic. So I thought that one combined to that, then maybe, I'll be a plastic surgeon.
Right.
But things came up, I met my ex-husband there. And then I have, a baby. So I immigrated back to the United States after medical school. And with that, I found a job at one of the hospitals here in San Diego, and started, actually, they said they were going to give me a path and they were going to teach me to be a clinical documentation improvement specialist.
Mm-hmm.
So with that one, they had to start me at the medical record, kind of like indexing and all that
Oh,
little stuff.
geez.
Yeah, and getting paid, like, I think, that medical
Humble
record.
beginnings.
Yeah, from the humble beginnings. And
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. I
Mm-hmm.
have a baby, I have, like, to support. So I started with that. And so I do know the parts of the medical record, what they do in there, and all those little things that HIM does with our record. After, I think it's only like within a couple of months, started doing the CDI. They trained us for clinical documentation improvement and things like that. And then after that, maybe a year and like couple of months, maybe more than a year and a half, I studied for the CCDS and then the CCS.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got those certifications. And once I got all those certifications, I was brought into the consulting company
Wow.
of one of the largest, health information system company in the nation. I guess I could say that. So with that, I actually skyrocketed my career, and that's how I met you. And
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I have met a lot of coders and a lot of CDI and leaders in this industry with my career from that company.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, I was also one of the pioneer, trainer for that software,
Mm-hmm.
because we started with, I think, I don't know, maybe 10 or 14 CDI, and a lot of them like didn't make it. They're like,
Oh,
that's not
really?
for us.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot of traveling.
That's what
It's
I
like,
wanted. That's what I wanted to ask is
uh-huh.
because I know consulting, like when I graduated back in 2003, like one of my goals was like to be a consultant because like whenever I went to um like a conference, I would look at the vendors. I'm like, oh, they got it made. They're pretty cool. They're wearing the nice little suits and
Suit, yes,
yeah, and the nice dresses. They look pretty,
yeah.
well kept. They seem like they're well paid. And I remember it wasn't in Florida, but it was over in San Francisco where we attended the national conference, and I just kept on asking questions like, oh, what do you do, and what is it that your job is like? Oh, we do consulting, we travel. This is when we used to, before remote technology, right? They would travel you over, you would do work there, you would come back home, and then you would travel again and
It
do all
seems
the things.
lucrative, right? It's
Yeah.
like, okay, travel and travel. but it does take a toll,
Mm.
on you. Like I'm always at the airport running like in Monday morning to get to my flight to get to
Yeah.
where, because I could be from a West Coast type of client up to the East Coast type of a client,
Mm.
and then Thursday or Friday, then you go back again and just spend the weekend at your house and then on to the next client.
Mm.
So it is a great opportunity to meet a lot of people in the industry, lots of great clients, very smart people I've met along the way. And just like you said that, like you always network with these people, I always try to keep, in contact with some of my coworkers or co-consultants from
Mm.
that company. And I also, with the clients, try to get in touch with them as well as my previous recruiters and all that stuff. So I don't burn bridges.
All right, right. So you said they some of the consultants felt like it wasn't for them. Like, what was it like? Like, was there anything specific that kind of like, okay, I'm when you were doing it, or other people were doing it, they're like, okay, I can't do this no more. What was that point aside from the traveling? Was it burnout? Was it other stuff? Like what? Like there's sometimes like consulting is great, but like there's stuff that people don't really necessarily tell you
Yeah.
until you're in the role. And then when you're in the
Mm.
role, like, oh shoot, like I wish somebody had told me that. So I would, what would you tell like, aspiring consultants, like what should they expect? Like, like people look at medical coding like, ooh, it's nice and easy. But then when they finally get into it, like, oh my gosh, it's so hard. I can't even deal with it. And they kind of, finish themselves and kind of like leave the profession itself. So like what are some of what should they look out for? I think that's a better question. What should they look
Well,
out for when they're considering some type of role like this? Hopefully later on down the line, when everything kind of calms down, when everybody can, do more travel to sites.
well, first of all, you got to have some, a lot of soft skills when it comes to being a consultant because you deal with a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
So dealing with people is not dealing like with our medical records and just reviewing that records because we're humans and we all have different reactions. So you have to kind of be flexible,
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to dealing with people. And then again, so that's kind of one of the perks is you meet lots of great people. But there's also sometimes there are, some clients that are very, very difficult that can make
Difficult
your
people, yeah.
life, difficult as well, being a consultant,
Uh-huh.
because it's kind of like, who are you? What do you know? What can you provide for us that we already don't know, like
Mm.
that we don't know,
Mm-hmm.
especially, when I went into this role, I feel like, a lot of the people have already been there years and years of experience. So you kind
Yeah.
of want to prove yourself, that you do know something and that you have something to give and to kind of like teach these other people of what you know. I mean, for me, especially, I do have um, a medical degree background, so that really helps me a lot for the things that I could see clinically, and I could decipher like, okay, let me put on my clinical hat,
Mm-hmm.
or let me put on my coding hat, and
Mm-hmm.
let me put on my CDI hat when it comes to kind of giving some recommendations and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So traveling as well, sometimes the delays in the flights, oh my god, sometimes you are stuck at the airport, for a lot of hours of delays. And if you don't have, miles and points like that, you're gonna be bumped from the next flight to the next, especially when it's winter. Winter,
Oh,
there's
I
just
could imagine.
storms. If I'm stuck at the East Coast and I want to go, back home, but thank goodness there's some good people along the way. Like I think I was in Michigan one time, and it was like Valentine's Day. The next day, and I was like, my little boy, like I make excuse that I like my little boy is waiting for me, can you like kind of let me in into this flight.
Uh-huh.
And then they feel bad, so they would give me like a flight, they exchange a flight from one different airline to the next so that I could go on to the next. So there are really kind people out there that
Mm-hmm.
helps you. And again, the things that other people do are like, make it difficult as well. So you got to watch out for that, delays. because there was the one thing in particular, there are of course other customers in the plane that like make your life difficult, kind of like kick your seat, and you're already tired from the long, like,
Oh yeah.
yeah, days of work, and all you want to do in the plane is just sleep, right?
Yeah.
So those type of things. What else? Of course, you have to be always like on the go. A lot of the things that your chores you need to do over the weekend, but so there's less time to spend with your family, because again, you're like 80% you're traveling. So what else? Internet connection, that's also like a problem if you're trying to have a go live and training with
Oh
people,
yeah.
and you have technical difficulties. Clients will get upset if a lot of those things are not working, or you don't know, or if there's a place and it's like you don't know how to get there because you haven't been there, and it's not accessible, because sometimes we have to go to places where it's not really like the main city. Sometimes there's places where it's like a rural area,
Mhm.
and the only hotel that they will provide, or of course the only hotel that is going to be your choice, those type of things that you have to deal with. So yeah, I think that's I couldn't think of that many
But like most of
negatives.
it would be like logistics, like getting yourself there, like
Getting
planning your
myself
trips,
there,
all of that stuff.
yes, I think that's very difficult because your sleep, it's not great when you sleep in the plane, right? And of course you need your rest and things
Mhm.
like that. So, and then of course missing my son, my family,
I bet.
that's the big deal, I think, of not wanting to go back like that route again.
And even when you were working with me and I guess my team, right?
Mhm.
Uh, you were there in the morning, you left like I know afternoon, but once you get to the hotel, I'm sure you're not done. Like you still
No,
gotta,
I'm not done yet.
yeah, that's what I
Sometimes
can
we would
imagine.
go, because when you go to a client, that office time with the clients, but then you have to do the office work at your computer,
Hmm.
basically.
Hmm.
Your client's email, or the project in itself, we have to finish the report at the end of the week. So the time spent is the whole day. You're with your clients training. After that, you're gonna make your report in the evening, and sometimes it doesn't end till 11, or
Oh
12.
geez.
Yeah, depending on how much like record reviews, those are kind of hard, and like very labor
I
intensive,
bet. Yep.
when we
Hmm.
go to a client. So
Hmm.
depending on the project, the amount of time and labor, and depending on how many people you get to work with, and if everybody is also a team player or not, that affects the whole project.
Yeah.
um,
No, I remember when you were there, it's like you were just like I don't know how long you were there. Were you there for like a week? Was it a week or
yeah,
two
I was
weeks?
there for a week, and
A
I'm glad
week.
I have like my son there, because we get to enjoy some of the places
Yeah.
afterwards. We
Yeah.
stayed over the weekend, to enjoy and sightsee
I
in
know the
Florida.
beginning of the week you were very energized, and then by like the end of the week, you're like, I'm like,
I was
okay,
very
okay,
tired.
so,
Yes.
yeah, we're
Yes.
gonna. I said, okay, don't worry, we got it. I learned it. If anything, they'll just tell me, and I'll just relay it to you, and that type of stuff. And I mean, you were a good trainer,
Oh, you're
but
very memorable, so that's why I remember you. And I was like, hey, that's Brian. I know
yeah,
him.
yeah, yeah. I caught on to the like. I had a guest before, and I was saying to her like the best way I can learn a new software is not listening. I mean, I listen to you, right? Not that I wasn't listening to you, but I was listening to you,
You got to say that, right? Make me
right?
feel better.
And I had the I know you gave us materials, but I just went in it. Like I just went in and just started tinkering around till I found it.
Correct.
And then once you started talking about a certain concept, I made sure like, okay, I get this, did I get that, did I get this, did I get that. I was just kind of like, like an open playground, in
Yes.
the environment. And then I think by the time you finish, I'm like, okay, I think like for me, my goal is like, okay, if I'm learning something, then I need to teach it to somebody because I know there were people who didn't grasp it. And
Yes.
so I like, okay, if she leaves, like, who's gonna be the guy or the lady who they're gonna go to ask questions.
Right.
And I knew it was gonna be me because out of like, I think what was it, like 12?
Weren't you the super user? Because like we designate a super user.
I think so.
You were the super user.
Yeah, I was one of the super users, and I'm like, okay, if she's gone, who's gonna do it? And I said, okay, it has to be me. So I made sure, like, we did all the testing, and then we did all of the tinkering around. We played with the CAC, we played with the natural language processing. I know, like, for those that are wondering what CAC is, it's like it's suggested codes. And so you got to make sure those suggested codes line up with what's documented, and you're not just like clicking the suggested codes and adding it.
Or else you wouldn't have a job.
Right,
It's going to be the computer's job, right?
Like, don't let the machine do the work for you. You got to
don't let the machine do the work.
I remember you telling me that.
Yeah. Assist you and help you, but you're still a human, and be able to kind of pick which is the right code for you.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I'm like, oh wow. And so I think one of the things that I had to learn was, okay, if they're suggesting it, then we should be validating it. Like it helps a lot, like this natural language processing and CAC, to eliminate a lot of the tedious, as you say, the tedious reading, flipping through pages, going through tabs, finding this and that. It's like it's already pulled out some of the keywords.
Didn't you love it that it's like when you search for something, just to make sure that it's not there or it's there?
Yeah.
Like the search function is like,
Yeah, that's what it is. It's like it should give me like a, I don't know if anybody would understand it, but it's like it's the technology gave me like a work queue of key phrases that I need to look at. And so what I did was, okay, here's the suggested code. Then the clinical mind needs to say, okay, what are some of the things that would validate that? And then you would start searching on the electronic health record side, like, okay, what are some of the keywords? Like, for example, if it was CHF, okay, does the patient have, effusions, edema, JVD, elevated pro-BNP? I would look for those things, LASIX, and see if some of those things kind of match in and support what the CAC is trying to show
suggest.
me. Yeah, suggest. Yes, suggestion. Like, okay. And then
it's a suggestion, doesn't mean you have to take it.
Hey everybody, if you are enjoying the podcast so far, please consider liking this video and also subscribing to the Not Elsewhere Classified podcast YouTube channel so you can be notified for future videos. Also, please check out the Medical Coding Geek YouTube channel, where I also post videos on the medical coding, CDI, and HIM community. Also, check out medicalcodinggeek.com, where we offer a lot of services, including our Facebook groups. You can go to medicalcodinggeek.com/services. Check out our Facebook groups, including Medical Coding Geeks, the RHIT and RHIA exam support group, the CDI network. We have a marketplace where you can sell and buy your books. We also have the CEU hit list. If you're interested in free CEUs, I release a monthly list of free CEUs that I find on the internet. Also, you could follow us on social media. Not Also Classified. Everything is at NEC Podcast. For Medical Coding Geek, it's at MED Coding Geek. You could find us on Facebook, Instagram, and we are also on TikTok. If you are listening to this episode, please make sure to subscribe and rate our show on Apple Podcasts. All the ratings and the reviews help our show get noticed. Also, I wanted to take a moment to promote our partners. You could check them out at medicalcodinggeek.com/partners. They include the Haugen Consulting Group, RadRx, Project Resume, Renowned Talent, and so much more. And of course, you could find me, Brian Cui. My last name is spelled CUI on LinkedIn. So without further ado, let's return back to the show.
Correct. And so I was like, okay, once I put it together, then we could hit, okay, I'm going to put it into the account as a listed code. And so I remember a lot of at least not the CDI. The CDIs were okay. They liked it. I kind of had to explain to them, that function. But I think the coders were like, oh no, I don't know if we could do this, because I know it was a separate trainer, right? You were the CDI. There was a separate trainer for the coding.
The
And
coders.
so I remember.
Sometimes I train the coders too.
Do you?
But depending on the client, because sometimes they would have like the actual a coder trainer. But if it's like a smaller hospital, then I would do both.
Oh, you do both? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I found it to be very interesting, and I remember I'm still looking at the LinkedIn messaging, and I I said, "Oh, I want to grow up to be you one day." Like that would be.
I want to grow up to be you, a famous blogger.
Oh, geez. Well, you could do it.
But
I mean,
I don't have the patience to do it every day, or not every day, but
yeah,
to consistently do it, because I mean, I do have, my family, my son to take care of. I mean, and then I have my full-time job,
That's right.
and then the gym, and then all the socializing,
I'm in the same boat too, because like sometimes I would have to, like, I would balance. I have a full-time job myself, and so I'm balancing. Like, you have a child. I have 3 kids. One that goes.
You have 3.
I have 3. I have one that goes. Yeah, the thing is, over here they don't take the bus. I have to drive them. I have to wake up at 6, drive them at 6:30, drop them off at 6:40, go through the major highway, come back, start work, and then I would have to pick up my son from football. Thank God my oldest daughter has a friend that can drop her off. And then from there, like, okay, I'm tired. Like before, when in 2020, when the kids were home, all I did was work. And so I had enough time to do a podcast. I had enough time to do, think about doing YouTube. And so when I started YouTube in the summer, it was great. And then when my son started his football and this kid starting school, then you're like, okay, what's priority here?
Right.
And the way I look at it, I'm just going to be very blunt. It's like, okay, who's paying my bills? And so where's my bills being paid? I said, well, my full-time job is. And so where should priority be? But this, the podcast is always going to be there. It's just always nice for me to conversate. And then the YouTube channel is like, I have like, where is it? Back here, that little board, you see it here. So like I have like stuff that I want to talk about. And then I bought where's this thing here, like a stand. And so I could just, if I had an idea, I just start recording, start talking and just come up with a very quick video and then post it on a specific topic. Because if I write down the idea and I don't record it, I'll just forget it. Like my energy for that topic will be lost. So that's why I have to do it very quick.
I know what you mean. There's ideas that comes when you're like sleeping and you close your eyes and then ding, just like the cartoons.
Yeah. Like, oh my gosh, if I don't do this now, I'm gonna forget. Or like, like there's a topic here that I want to talk about about education, but it's like, do I even want to do that now? Like the energy's lost. Like, so, or if I have, like, there were times where I used to do podcasts and I forget to record. And so we would go think I'd record. That's why I said in the beginning, let me hit record now before I forget. There was one time I was talking to, who was it? His name was Don Self. And we were already an hour in and we're like, oh, shoot. Can we start this again? But then we went through the same questions and the energy just wasn't there. Like, like you have to. It wasn't
there. Yeah.
To begin with. When you're doing recording stuff and like that, you just have to keep up a very good energy. It's the same thing like when you're doing, your consulting job. There's a certain level of energy you have to keep up all day. And I am like, oh, how is she keeping up this energy trying to, make a, I don't know. I don't want to say it's boring,
make
but
yourself very effective as a trainer. You got to have a different intonation and kind of be like, wake up, or else, why are we here? Right. Let's just go home if you're not going to listen to me. And if we're not going to be able to kind of go over these topics, with you. So that type of energy that wears you down at the end of the night.
Yeah,
So,
I can
and
imagine.
for the whole week, if you do it with a lot of people, so sometimes we did get clients before that are maybe 30,
Mm.
in one sitting down, because I think
Yeesh.
a combination of the CDIs and the coders and, some quality um, folks. So
Would you
that type of
consider
energy.
would you consider yourself like more like an introvert or more of an extrovert?
I'm definitely an extrovert, and I did love
Yeah.
my speaking in public. So, I know that's one of like the most fear, like people fear public speaking,
Hmm.
but I do love public speaking. I think it accelerates me.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, that's probably because also when I was growing up in the Philippines, first grade, second grade, my mom used to enter me in those contests where it's like
Oh.
poem
Mhm.
or like what is declamation contest. I don't know if you know what that is, but I have to memorize like a long pages of like paragraphs, and I have to deliver that in front of
Like a
the
speech.
audience. It's
Hmm.
a speech. It's kind of like a speech, and then tended to excel in that. So I feel like this accelerates me, and I love it. I love talking to people. I think that's one of my strong suites. I get sad when I'm by myself a lot, so I need that. I need that people, because it feeds, my energy. That's what I, that's why I think I consider myself like a full on extrovert. I know my boyfriend is an introvert because
Oh, is
he
he?
just gets, he just gets drained, by my friends and
Uh-huh.
by me. He's like, you talk too much.
I can imagine. Yeah, like I would consider myself like I would I guess introvert, but like I have extrovert
Tendencies.
qualities.
Yeah,
Yes,
quality.
tendencies. Yes, yes, yes. And so like if I'm like for example doing this, I can handle it. Like it's very energy draining. So after this I'm going to be like this. Or if I'm doing a speaking event, uh for some reason I'm so hungry after like when you did the training, you had to like all of a sudden go get pastelitos over at the cafeteria, and you needed like a cortadita, the Cuban the coffee and all of that. I'm like, oh, I can imagine, because like your whole day is just talking and giving out energy and doing them. By the end of the day, you're drained for real.
Right, right. Yeah, I hear you.
So from the training position, where did you move to next? As I know you spent some time there, and then after that we connected on LinkedIn, and then from there you moved on from that company and you went on somewhere else. What happened from there?
So I move on from that, large company that skyrocketed my career to something, another consulting, another consulting firm, which I get to focus more on the coding.
Mm,
So the other one is like a CDI trainer, and then this one is more of like, auditing. It's more
mm.
auditing, education, and auditing, education, and the coding side. So with that company, I get to train physicians all over the nations because that was the time when we were transitioning from ICD-9 to
Oh, that's right.
ICD-10.
I see it. Mhm.
So we need to educate physicians, what they need to document in the record in order to kind of, the coders to get all the information that they need in the record, to code as easy as they can, but that's always a task. So I've trained physicians in New York, Massachusetts,
More
here
traveling,
around here in
right?
California, yeah, for traveling as well. But mostly with that company, it's remote
Oh,
position as
nice.
well. So I get to stay here in California and only get to travel when there are training that I need to do um, for our client.
So it
So
wasn't as rigorous, like
it
you.
wasn't as rigorous,
Mhm.
And again, it's focused on auditing,
Oh,
um,
okay.
focused on auditing and focused on education. So with that, after that,
Well, let me ask this question. What do you
mm,
think would be the major difference of teaching a software in doing the work that we do versus what you did in this role, educating physicians? Like, what are some of the differences between those two? Teaching a software versus teaching physicians
Well,
actual like documentation, CDI, coding concepts.
Well, I mean, having the background of the CDI and teaching the software to use for that and the coding
Mhm.
does help a lot, because when you give examples and then you don't make sense, people are going to think like you don't really know what you're doing, right? Even if you're teaching a software, when technically you just need to learn what the software, the bells and whistles of it, and train how to use it,
Right,
per
right.
se. But having that background really do help when it comes to, oh, here's how you do it, you pick up the code, things like that, and people listen to you more, and you're more trustworthy because of that background. And then the difference between that is that, I guess, you're teaching something that is a technical piece, right? In the other side, you're teaching the content or the knowledge base when it comes to teaching
Mm,
the documentation, or you're teaching the coding, or what physicians need to document in the record in order to transition to the ICD-10.
so
And
do
you
you,
also teach, the concepts, when it comes to CDI, like what do we look for in the record, what should be coded and what's not, what things like that. That's the major difference between those two positions.
like the way I see it in that role, the auditing and physician educator, CDI consultant, it shifts the, I guess, the expertise, right?
It
From the
does.
product to yourself, right?
Well, the thing about it, though, from the very large health information system company that I used to work for, is I
Mm,
do two things. I train, with the I train the software to how to use it, but there's also a different, which is a program evaluation that I used to do for that, and that entails like evaluating their CDI program. So
okay.
we do record review, and at the end we present also concepts about coding and CDI and documentation, with that.
It was
So
a bit more holistic.
it's more holistic, like the big healthcare, I mean the health information system, it is a software plus that program evaluation, right?
Ah, okay.
The other one that I transitioned into is just more of just a program evaluation type of thing. It's more of
Okay.
like,
Okay.
there's no teaching about a software, or things like that.
Would you feel do you feel it was easier per se because you're not teaching a software rather than you're just focusing on concepts, or
Say it's easier. Both has its own challenges, and
mm,
whatever you like most, I guess. I really love that I have different type of things that I do for that other company, not just like teaching the concepts. You know what I'm saying? Like for the
mm,
other one, like teaching the technical stuff, that's easy
yeah,
for
yeah, yeah,
me,
right.
because when that started, we didn't have any manual for that software.
Mm-hmm.
We had to develop that manual and help write those manuals down in order how to use that software.
Right, because when I think about it, like I guess going back to the software, is whenever I think about software, if I'm trying to learn a software, I always have to think about, or if I'm working with IT, there's always like, what is the workflow? What is A? What is Z? And I think when you're doing like a training in software, you have to teach the software, but then where does it fit, you know, along the
Mm-hmm.
way in your job? And so
Correct.
that to me is in itself, from a IT, from a software aspect, it's very challenging because as you say, you went to multiple sites, and each of those sites probably had a different way of doing things, right?
Correct.
And so you have to integrate that actual software, the actual new technology into what they do. And I think that's where you kind of get a lot of the resistance per se, or the
Mm-hmm,
where you
mm-hmm.
have to work into that role. And then when I think about what in the next role, it's like, okay, concepts, but how does it meet with their concepts? How does it meet with their policies and procedures? I've seen that where it kind of like it clashes, or
Right.
it
And some
requires a
people,
lot of change management or acceptance.
and some people are very resistant to change when it
Mm,
comes, especially to a new software. They said like, oh, why should I use that? We already have, like, I'm so used to looking at our medical record,
mm.
and it's easier for me. Like, why should I be using that, software? So that is always like a challenge that,
Well, how
we
do you
have to
answer
break.
that question though?
Huh?
How do you
Oh,
tackle that question?
I do answer that type of question is because there's the bells and whistles that we offer in that software itself, right? It could
Mm,
look for things that you can't when you're flipping through a medical record. It's like one note per note. You can't search the whole notes on for words just like what it does. It at that time there's really not too many software that has the auto suggest and like the natural language processing that it
mhm.
kind of learns, what you usually code. So there's other things that will help you, make your life easier when it comes to the workflow. Instead of going one by one, you going through these things, you can mark it that you've reviewed it.
Mhm.
The other medical record company, you can't check mark that thing, unless it's a paper and said, and
That's
I
right.
don't think, yeah, exactly. In that software, you can mark that like I reviewed this. You can compare two notes, which one is new, which one is copied and pasted, those type of things, right?
What about conceptual disagreements? Like, okay, you present a specific, sounds like an interview question for a job,
I know, right?
but
You might be interviewed,
maybe
maybe.
since this is being recorded, but
It's like being
the
interviewed up there for those.
but like you mentioned, there are people and out there that are resistant to change, like more conceptual wise. Like, okay, we used to code this the way, for so long, and then here you come in with this new concept, or even with a physician, whoever it may be, like, I've never heard of this, I've never worked with this, I don't think I will ever deal with this, but you're trying to bring in this concept that will help out the organization. How do you kind of like ease them in and help them accept the concept, or be willing to open the
What do
change?
you mean? Like kind of like a
Like for
concept when it comes
example,
to
okay, let's do, I think
coding?
a better one would probably be coding. Let's stick with the coding, right? So like if there's a coder who's like, okay,
Okay.
we've been doing, coding this, I'm just gonna pick out a diagnosis, acute kidney injury, right? We've been doing
Correct.
acute kidney injury
Yeah.
for whatever, and we've been following KDIGO guidelines. I'm just referring back to Alan Frady, who posted something on LinkedIn, like, about the 0.3 difference versus the 1.5 difference. Like, let's for
Mhm.
example, oh, this facility does 1.3, but, literature states 1.5, and there's some certain issue or criteria for 0.3 rise or decrease in or change in
Mhm.
creatinine. How would you kind of, I guess for me, it's like, how would you like put everything out there so that way they can see it your way? I think that's the way I would probably want to phrase that.
Well,
Like
okay.
if you're coming in with an idea and they don't accept it, how do you
I mean, being in compliance right now, I do that a
Mhm,
lot of times, in my job, my current job, my current
mhm.
role, which I think it's always hard because it's always shoot the messenger, right?
Yeah,
I'm like, I'm just doing my job, right? So
that's a good one.
nobody, nobody wants to be corrected. Nobody
That's
wants to
right.
say you're wrong,
Mhm,
So the approach really helps a lot. Again, I mentioned to you earlier, there's different type of people. So different type of people, you approach them differently.
mhm,
Some people rely on facts, with coders especially, you have to present them of what is, the the hierarchy in the coding, right? When it comes to which reference you're going to use.
mhm.
You go with the ICD-10 CM, the code book, then you go with the coding guidelines, and then the coding clinic, and then, the rest. That hierarchy, you present that in that fashion in order to give them the kind of say, hey, you code it this way based on, ICD-10 CM, a tabular and alphabetic index, or, you according to coding clinic, you code it, you just present them facts. You don't kind of attack on a different manner. And then what really comes to that is they will come to the realization that like, oh, well, that does make sense. And then you want to hear what their feedback, how they're looking at it at a different angles. Why do they see it that way? When you attack it that way and you see what are they thinking and why they think that way, it's easier for you to kind of point out like, well, I think of it this way because of this
Right.
way. I think there's one thing that was kind of like the bubbling up in my mind. It's something about like the poisoning codes, and how people always say like, okay, if it's an acute, kind of a condition, and then it's due to drugs, the acute condition is due to a drugs, you got to ask whether this has been used, wrongful dose, wrongful, dosage and all like that. Then it becomes like poisoning, right? As opposed that if it's properly used and things like that, then those are just like adverse effects.
Yeah,
So
adverse effect. Yep.
yes, so those type of things, when you kind of point it out to them that, okay, this condition is acute, right? Therefore, it's due to wrongful use, then it becomes to poisoning, as opposed to this one where it's an actual effect of that drug because it was used correctly.
Yeah, it was taken properly. Yes.
It was taken properly, and then they just have an acute reaction to it. So you gotta kind of think where they kind of got it wrong because they perceived it differently. You gotta kind of like say, okay, this condition is acute, or this condition is chronic. So when I do that and when I explain further, I have an easier time of giving the concept, rather than kind of just bluntly saying, no, you're wrong.
Yeah. Like, no, well, here's what I think you're wrong.
No,
Yeah.
it's not that way. You say,
Right, correct.
this is how I think it's correct, but it may be perceived as this because of this. You're not going to say like you're wrong. You're just going to say it may have been perceived this way because of this, and you explain the rationale. Explain the facts, and you lay out all the references, clinically, what's the medical consensus out there, things like that. Those are the things that you need to reference in order for them to get it. And if they still don't get it, that means you're not doing your job just yet. You just have to kind of,
it takes more
allow
time.
them take more time, allow them to raise their concern, and allow them to talk and listen to them. And when you listen to them, you kind of hear what their point is, then you kind of give your rationale why you think the other way. And usually that really, solves and the concepts they will be able to take in what you have given them.
Well, there you go. That is part 1 of my interview with Janice Amon. You can check out Janice on LinkedIn. She has told me that she has a presentation coming up with Dr. Ronald Hirsch on September 23rd. More details are coming, but the title of the presentation is called Addressing the 3 M's of the CMS, Provider Compliance Program, Medicare, Medicare Advantage, and Medical Necessity. So please stay tuned for more information on that presentation coming up.
medicalcodinggeek.com